Remember how like a year or two ago there were all of these popular videos, and I mean really popular, like pulling in millions of views popular, copy and pastes from trending comments or subreddits from, well, Reddit, and then they would utilize their computer's speech to text, record that speech, and then, I don't know, slap it into iMovie, Final Cut Pro or something, and then boom, that's it. No, I'm not even kidding. Look.
What's your secret that could literally ruin your life if it came out?
You ever wonder whatever happened to those? So today my dog and I want to talk about that genre. What happened? Where did it come from? Does it even exist now? And what are the trends? Buckle up, we're jumping into the weird parts of YouTube. So 2 years ago, we were at our peak for this Reddit Storytimes genre. Storytimes, of course, aren't unfamiliar to YouTube as a whole. You have entire creators, for better, for worse, whose entire careers were launched by Storytimes.
Like, the way she filled with rage was so fucking terrifying because it was literally over eyeshadow. Like, are you okay? She starts screaming at me in front of my entire class. The whole class is like, and I'm just like,
you know, just not necessarily making the wisest of choices given, you know, the overall situations that you're in. I'm sure you can't think of any examples. All the better if it's controversial, or if it's scandalous, or maybe if you sprinkle in a little white lies and then, you know, people bicker about it in the comments because, I mean, hey, no press is bad press, right? But one of the other side effects of these story times is that it really starts to increase or promote this parasocial relationship between the YouTuber or influencer, in the case of certain YouTubers, and the viewer. Parasocial relationships, if you aren't already familiar with the phenomenon, are effectively one-sided relationships with people that you don't actually know, but I mean, they're so incredibly relatable. I mean, you basically know them, right? We have a tendency to form these relationships whenever it comes to celebrities, effectively anyone who could be in the media that we don't actually know. Whether it's because your favorite comedian, like say John Mulaney and his sarcasm and existential dread, just like really vibes with you constantly screaming inside for fear of the unknown.
In terms of like instant relief, canceling plans is like heroin. It is an amazing feeling.
It's that relatability or even that sense of intrigue. Those are all things that draw us closer to them.
Oh, mommy boo. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we going to brunch. This is what they're like, yeah. And next thing you know, I'm sitting in the middle of a lake on a canoe.
And make us feel as though they're actually our friend. When in reality, they probably don't even know that you and I exist. And that's not anything malicious or mean against them. If you've got 1 million followers on YouTube or millions of fans around the world, or heck, even 100 or 1,000, you don't know their names or faces. You don't know their personalities. You don't know where they're from. You might hit, you know, the refresh button obsessively to see your number go up or to see what regions of the world are from, but, you know, very rarely are you going to come across someone who genuinely knows the community that is associated with them. And so that's really at the core of what these parasocial relationships are. So what on earth do these parasocial relationships have to do with these former Reddit story times? Well, I'll get to that in a second. It's important we understand how this connectivity drives popularity and engagement first. Bunny Still is a great example of YouTubers who have nailed utilizing parasocial relationships to the point that actually PBS's Nova did an article last year contextualizing this phenomena through the perspective of one of her fans. It says, studies have found that these parasocial relationships can help put people at ease, particularly useful for those with long self-esteem, calming their fears of social rejection. But some experts argue that these types of relationships may also lead people to develop unrealistic expectations that could affect how they handle their real-life relationships. And that's really where I see the dots start to connecting. So everyone always wants the magic formula. How do I become the next YouTuber? How do I become the next big thing? How do I monetize? Or the second that they get monetized, they like try and get people to view their channel or view the video on their channel about how they did it. People who have looked at creators like Tana Mongeau, who honestly is the first person I think of still whenever I think of story times. And Tana Mongeau is another great example of a creator who has mastered this idea of parasocial relationships through story times. She doesn't really do them much anymore. How do I know this? Well, I've never actively watched her videos, but her influence of her shenanigans permeates so much through the platform. She's constantly mentioned in other people's videos, and she has an MTV series. So it comes as no surprise that people would look at something like that level of success and go, you know what else is really popular and gets an insane amount of engagement? Well, certain subreddits do. Things like r/petty revenge and malicious compliance, and actually all of the revenge subreddits do. Entitled parents subreddits, and even the anti-MLM subreddit. And why might those subreddits be popular? Well, how many times have you been working somewhere or seen something and seen someone totally misbehaving, totally entitled, and you really wanted to say something or to just be that first person who tells them no, but you realized you would lose your job over it because the customer is always right, or you were at a really crappy job and you kind of just wanted to do some sort of outlandish way of quitting. You know, these are the stories that everyone in the comments section just kind of wishes that they lived vicariously through. So they became very successful overnight, both on Reddit and then once they were introduced on YouTube. Every time you hop a platform, you are reaching new demographics. So for example, you know, Facebook has its own demographic as a whole. YouTube has its own demographics of who the users tend to be. That's even why, for example, Pewdiepie was going to put some of his videos up on Facebook for the first time, because there are people there who otherwise would never have this intersection of the content. So the second that you are hopping content from one platform to another, you are reaching entirely new audiences where it suddenly comes off as original content. These videos, especially from 2 years ago to 1 year ago, as we can see here, were pulling in views by the millions. These accounts spread like wildfire because it was literally a cut and copy paste formula. It's so easy to the point there are channels that put out multiple videos a day. None of it was original content though, so flash forward to now and you see much of the same problems in terms of engagement and viewership that you do with Graveyard Girl's account. For any account, your ideal engagement that you want is at least 10%. The idea of why this is because in marketing, the funnel of conversion is basically an inverted triangle from your first impression down to if, you know, they click through to your post, your website, your YouTube account, and then do they watch the video? Do they complete their view to the point that YouTube counts it as a view? If you're not hitting that 10% threshold, your engagements are so lacking that the algorithm's not going to notice it as much, it's not going to promote it as much, and effectively you have a channel in need of CPR. One of the more troubling trends that I've noticed for these Reddit Storytime accounts is that there is a certain number of them that have realized that they're severely lacking the engagement that they need, and that they're making a trend of using intentionally misleading, provocative in either sexual or violent or combination of both thumbnails to try and get views back. It's kind of difficult to illustrate that without doing something that is blatantly against the guidelines of now YouTube. So let me try and explain it. There's this account, Storytime with Reddit. If you go through their videos, there's a very clear trend where they'll post like a generic or grab bag, sort of a themed one, you know, that's just your run-of-the-mill stuff. And then following that will be 2 to 3 of those really provocative sort of videos. I mean that in ways that are typically violations of COPPA. It'll include like Kim Possible or Barbie or those cartoony childhood icons that are the whole reason why COPPA became a thing, because people were using childhood icons and other issues with children. Honestly, it seems like as a whole, this kind of content is dying. It's not as personable as it used to be. The quote-unquote market is super saturated and overdone. We relatively hear the same stories over and over and over again, and it just gets flooded with like the weird kind of sexual stories, or like the creepy ones, or like outright violent ones. Which people are still apparently watching, but by and large, most people are not. The people who are still successful are, I can see, the ones who started off with the genre and moved either onto other things or who adapted. The iilluminaughtii, or Blair, who is more tapped into the genre, who, interestingly enough, I can't find any of her original videos for these like Reddit story times. I remember her reading aloud the anti-MLM subreddit ones, and then like providing her commentary on top of it. So you got her commentary and her jokes, and it was like much more personable than just like a robot talking like this. Oh god, that's so bad. She's still honed into that multi-level marketing topic. It seems like it's been a really effective way of adapting and growing her channel, and she still continues her multi-level marketing Mondays, but from what I can see, they've evolved from what they were 2 years ago, and that's okay. Nothing is stagnant, change is good. And from what I can see, the original accounts that I remember to putting on in the background to listen to funny stories or, you know, chaotic retail accounts, they don't really exist anymore. For whatever reason or another, they've either been washed over by the algorithm, or people have deleted them and moved on once they stopped becoming profitable. It seems like this is the beginning of the end for the timeline. I don't know how much longer this genre will continue on for, if even it continues on. I could almost see this being the kind of thing that's just completely forgotten in lieu of some sort of, you know, challenge or trend.